for purposes of House Bill 99.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to ask that House Bill 99, as amended, be read in by title only and brought before the Senate for consideration.
Mr. Reading Clerk, kindly read in House Bill 99 as amended.
House Bill number 99 with House Amendment 1, sponsored by Representative Heffernan, Phillips, Senator Hansen, and others. An act to amend Title 7 and 29 of the Delaware Code relating to climate change. Madam President, that concludes the reading of House Bill number 99 with House Amendment 1 by title only.
We have House Bill 99 before us. Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam President. Discussions about climate change and the effects of climate change are nothing new for this chamber. Whether you believe that human activity is wholly or partly to blame for climate change, there's no reasonable scientific argument at this point that human activity plays no part. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a United Nations body and the preeminent world authority on climate change, its impacts and future risks, and predictions of future climate change impacts under specific scenarios. Thousands of experts from 195 countries all over the world contribute to the work of the IPCC. As a result of some of the comments in committee on HB 99 last week, I circulated to the committee members the IPCC 2023 Synthesis Report, Summary for Policymakers. I just want to read a couple of the statements from this report. Human activities, principally through emissions of greenhouse gases, have unequivocally caused global warming. Global greenhouse gas emissions have continued to increase, with unequal historical and ongoing contributions arising from unsustainable energy use, and land use change, lifestyles and patterns of consumption and production across regions, between and within countries, and among individuals. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere, and biosphere have occurred, affecting weather and climate extremes in every region across the globe. Some future changes are unavoidable and irreversible, but can be limited by deep, rapid, and sustained global greenhouse gas emission reduction. And lastly, climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. There is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. If those words from the IPCC don't move you, they don't compel you to act when presented with the opportunity to do so, which will be today, now, then there is nothing that I'm going to be able to say to change your mind standing here today. We have a pivotal role to play here today. The decision we make today from this floor will determine whether we as a state are going to pick up this charge from the world's leading scientists and experts, thousands of them, to do our part, to keep our planet habitable. You can't get much bigger than that. And when you look into the eyes of your children and your grandchildren and the people you care about tonight, how are you going to feel about the vote you are making today? Because this is where the rubber hits the road. This is when it's going to matter. So let's get to the bill. At a high level, it's very simple. It sets goals for greenhouse gas emission reduction and a procedure that state government will follow in order to reach those goals. It comes after many months of meetings with stakeholders from environmental groups, business groups, DNREC, and the governor's office since last summer. You may recall the previous version of this bill from last year, Senate Bill 305, that passed this chamber. Additional conversations were necessary and were had, and now we have a bill with broad support and one, importantly, that has passed the House. So what are the goals? Number one, by 2030, the state's greenhouse gas emissions on a net basis shall be reduced by not less than 50% from a 2005 baseline. This considers greenhouse gas emissions from all economic sectors, including electric power, transportation, industrial, residential, and commercial buildings, agriculture, waste management, energy. And this is in line with Maryland's 2030 target of a 50% reduction by 2030. And secondly, by 2050, the state's greenhouse gas emissions shall be stabilized at or below net zero emissions. At least 13 other states have enacted similar provisions to reach net zero by 2050, including Maryland, Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and a number of others. Net zero by 2050 also matches the federal government's pledge under the Paris Climate Accords. Net zero greenhouse gas emissions does not mean zero greenhouse gas emissions. It means that the greenhouse gases that we're releasing into the atmosphere are offset by reduction strategies, such as carbon storage, carbon sequestration through land use practices, forestry and agriculture, and other means, such that the net result is zero greenhouse gas emissions. This bill also sets out the procedure our state government will follow in order to reach those goals. This is an all-agency approach. Reaching these goals is not just something that implicates the Department of Natural Resources. 9 key cabinet-level departments will identify one individual from each of their departments to serve as their agency's climate change officer. Using the 2021 Climate Action Plan as a framework, each climate change officer will act as the point person to incorporate the state's greenhouse gas reduction targets into their agency's operations, including purchasing, siting, construction and maintenance of state buildings, the planning, design, and operation of state infrastructure, and much more, as further provided in the Climate Action Plan. So who are those 9 agencies? It's DNREC, DELDOT, Department of Agriculture, Health and Social Services, the State Housing Authority, OMB, Department of State, Department of Education, and the Department of Homeland Safety and Homeland Security. As a group, this group will meet twice a year under the leadership of the state's Chief Climate Change Officer, who also serves as the head of the State Energy Office and the Director of Delaware's Division of Climate, Coastal, and Energy. That group will then meet to guide implementation of programs to meet our targets, to assess the status of implementation of legislation identified in the Climate Action Plan, and DNREC is required to hold an annual public meeting to provide an update on the implementation of the Climate Action Plan and receive public input. This bill also creates a new group to advise DNREC called the Technical Climate Advisors, and requires those advisors to issue sea level rise scenarios, temperature scenarios, and precipitation scenarios by November 15th, 2024, and then update those scenarios every 5 years. This bill leans heavily on the 2021 Climate Action Plan throughout, but also provides a mechanism for updating that plan every 5 years and developing a climate action implementation report every 2 years, beginning on January 1st, 2024. Lastly, this bill does not confer any independent statutory authority on state agencies to promulgate or amend regulations. Instead, it directs the agencies to consider and, to the extent practicable, incorporate the state's greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, Climate Action Plan, sea level rise scenarios, temperature scenarios, and precipitation scenarios in their promulgation of regulations. And so there you have it, the goals and the plan to reach those goals. That's what this bill is about. So I want to go back to what I said in the beginning. This is a pivotal time for our state, and our vote today will determine how engaged we are in doing our part to secure a livable and sustainable future for humanity on a global scale. We are ready and we are able. We will do this because we are actively, deeply invested in our future. We understand the cost of inaction and we care about what tomorrow brings. We understand the role that we must play. In the face of increasing danger around us from so many places, from extreme weather, heat, flooding, disease, we will roll up our sleeves, we will step forward, and we will step up. We will reach our goals. Roll call.
Very passionate. Senator Lawson.
Oh. Thank you, Madam President.
Yep.
A couple of questions to the sponsor, if I may.
Now, Senator Lawson.
Please identify what you refer to as greenhouse gases.
Senator Hansen.
Greenhouse gases are those gases that are emitted from many different operations that we have in our planet that tend to capture heat in our atmosphere. There are things like methane, carbon dioxide. There's about half a dozen or so chemicals that are considered greenhouse gases.
Senator Lawson.
Can you tell me what the percentage is, let's say, of CO2 in the atmosphere?
No, I
Senator
cannot
Hansen?
tell you what the percentage of CO2 is in the atmosphere. I suppose that it is different at different points in the atmosphere.
In the report
Senator Lawson.
that you referenced, and even going into the scientific report, not the political report, it identifies that I believe is 0.04%.
Senator Hansen.
Senator Lawson, it doesn't really matter what the number is. What matters is the fact that because this number is higher than it has been in the past, because it is higher, it is trapping heat in our atmosphere and is causing weather-related problems, flooding-related problems. It's causing dire consequences. And so we need to reduce it. What matters is not so much what that number is at a particular place, but is the fact that we have to get that number down.
Senator Lawson, then Senator Townsend. Senator Lawson.
I understand the desire to reduce it. To what level? What is ideal?
I believe, according to the IPCC report, what they would like to see is that we've reduced it to the level such that we'd have no more than a 1.5 degree Celsius increase in the average global temperature to the baseline, which I think is a 1890 baseline.
Right.
I'm guessing. I may ask.
Senator Lawson. Nothing else. Okay.
Yes.
Senator
Hold on.
Townsend. Oh. Well, I'm going to have Senator Townsend.
I'll
Go.
yield.
Senator Townsend.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no doubt that Senator Hansen will be able to continue to give responses to whatever questions are coming in this regard. I just wanted to note briefly, I guess, as we maybe go through this for an extended period of time, I don't know, with regard to different interpretations of numbers, that when it comes to the carbon number, for example, the idea of I don't want to say making a mockery of, but certainly throwing some kind of big scientific question as to what it means to have parts per million, and the idea that it's simply parts per million, therefore means a small percentage, a minute percentage, and therefore it's not a problem. I would just note, for example, that blood alcohol content is in a fraction of a percentage as well, but I know that senators who are involved with law enforcement understand that a very, very small fraction of your blood being contained of alcohol and as a BAC measurement is lethal. And so this is a very similar version of that for our planet. And for those who weren't in the Newark area last night to see what it's like to have many inches of rain pour down on a community and have it happen all across the world in different ways, I think perhaps maybe could do more to observe what's going on here. But with that, I yield back to Senator Hansen, more politely dispatching some of the questions.
So, Senator Hansen, if you had to comment, I think Senator Lawson had another question or comment. Senator Lawson?
So this just identifies a committee, one person from each 9 cabinets, to be the resource officer, right? To be
Senator
their
Hansen.
climate change officer. Is that correct?
It sets the goals and identifies a process, and as part of that process, there's the 9 key individuals that are identified from the different agencies that will act as the climate change officer, discussing what the agency needs to do in order to begin to reach the goals that we have.
Senator Lawson?
Do you see that promulgating regulations and laws?
Senator Hansen?
I think that, I believe that they would identify whether they need any additional legislative authority or they need to promulgate any additional laws. But I think that I could probably ask our secretary from DENREC to come up who
It's
may
not
be able to answer
necessary.
that question.
You didn't, are your questions answered then?
I have more later, but not right now. Thank you.
Right. Senator, did you want privilege now? It sounds like he didn't need it now. Did you? You don't need him? Do you have any other questions? Nope. So we're ready for a roll call?
No.
Senator Buxton?
Well, we're quick today, huh?
Yeah, we
Last
got a
week. Thank you,
long
Madam
agenda.
President.
All right, all right.
Yeah,
Senator
well,
Buxton.
this is an important one, right? And I respect the sponsor of the bill. I didn't get a chance to comment on the plastic one a minute ago, but I'll speak to this one, maybe include it. I wrote down some things, then I changed. Climate change, let's start with that one. I don't think you're going to get an argument from this side that climate change isn't real. That's not what we're asking. We're asking what it is that the human element has that's in control of climate change and at what cost. And what is it that Delaware controls? Because that's probably the biggest thing we're looking at here. You mentioned Paris Climate Accord or whatever that thing is. And the reason that it was a challenge, right, is because the United States, as well intended as we would be, we wouldn't have control of the greater contributors. And so our efforts would put us at an economic disadvantage, which is what these types of bills do, but we wouldn't have control of our neighbors. We don't, which are our states. Evidenced by some of the reports that we've seen, which says that a lot of what we face is out of our control. That has to be factored into bills. I know that's separate from what we're talking about now, but you mentioned also, as again, I make statements for the record, what's the biggest fear of Delawareans with this type of a legislation? It's our perception it's a massive expansion of government identified and including various agencies with what you just said a moment ago, potential to implement regulations, something that got us down this road not too long ago with EV mandates. Whether you agree or not, you have to agree that thousands of Delawareans are fearful of that. I'm fearful of that. I'm fearful of the legislation and the language that could enable that, which is why I get back to I'm not going to support a bill which has the real potential to economically harm Delawareans when we're not in control of our neighboring states, and which has the very real potential to take the people out of the decision, take this General Assembly away from the decision-making process and hand it over to bureaucracies. That is a very fair concern, one that's referenced in the folks that I talked to and in my understanding of it. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Lawson?
Another question to the sponsor, if I may.
Sure.
You said we want to bring it, or based on the baseline of 2005. What was that baseline? And where are we today?
Senator Hansen?
That, I think, is, I'm going to need to ask our Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources because it goes to the bill as to what our baseline was in 2005. I believe this was also the focus of discussion when we were talking about Senate Bill 305 last year and how close we were with regard to a goal at that point. So if I could have the privilege of the floor for the Secretary.
Yes. Personal privilege for the Secretary is granted. Mr. Secretary, good afternoon. Good to have you here. You know the drill. Identify yourself, title, and if you need the question repeated, let us know.
Sean Garvin, Secretary of Delaware's Department of Natural Resources, Environmental Control, and I think I know the question, which was what was the level in 2005
and where we are today.
Yeah, I think the baseline is in 2005 was 23.19 metric tons of CO2. We have reduced that by 27% as of 2018. We work with the EPA on establishing the numbers. We are currently evaluating 19 and 20. EPA will be coming out, and we should have that done by the fall to give an updated number through 2020. EPA is currently providing us information on 2021, which we will then use to evaluate where we are at 2021. But we have reduced from 2005 to 2018, 27%.
We've
Senator
reduced it by 27%? Thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
reduced it by 27%.
And what is the goal?
Well, the goal is to get reduction of 50% by 2030 and net zero by 2050.
So we're well on our way.
Yeah.
I have no further questions of the witness, ma'am.
Senator Hansen, do you have questions of your witness, or you want your witness excused?
I'd like the witness to be excused, but I have a feeling you shouldn't go far.
I'll be right back there.
Okay.
All right, definitely not. All right, the witness is excused. And speaking of excuse, I hate to interrupt during a bill dialogue, but you know how it is with students and schedules and summer. We have 2 interns that have been patiently watching and observing. And if you don't mind, because I know they have another event and place to go, I'm going to do a quick introduction to give a little levity to the room, some air to breathe, so to say. This is Theona Pando. Theona is a resident here in Delaware, lives in Lewis. We want to welcome her. She's at Haverford College. She has a double major in poli-sci and also media studies. So we're going to welcome her, and standing next to her is Ethan Grover, who's from Manhattan and is in awe of Delaware, student at the University of Delaware, going in the junior year. He too is a double major, history and poli-sci. And they have been patiently sitting here thinking they were going to get introduced probably an hour ago. So let's give them a warm Delaware welcome, and let's let them be excused. So thank you. Thank you. And if we get all the talent back, we'll be doing some good. And again, apologize for that, but they have been patiently waiting. I thought your roll call was going to be a little quicker. Senator Lawson, to you, sir.
Thank you. No further questions of the sponsor, just a few comments. I really think we are truly jousting with windmills, offshore and all the other green energies. I don't think that we in Delaware will make a tinker's darn when it comes to the atmosphere. We can work our tails off. We can burden our population with more and more regulations and more costs to get nowhere, all said and done. I don't think that's fair. I think it's absolutely high-handed of us to think that we can go ahead and run a bill or continue to run these green energy bills that sits squarely on the back of the working people here in Delaware. It makes no sense. CO2 is a life-affirming gas. It's not a damning gas. I know that does create problems in the upper atmosphere when it combines with moisture, and that provides the cap. It tends to keep the heat in. I get that. But yet when you're a farmer, you look for high CO2. If you have a captured crop, you pump CO2 in, and that crop develops almost 10 times faster than what it does in open air. We are chasing things that just don't make sense to the common folks. The people out there who are working, who are trying to make a living, and constantly being set upon by more regulations and higher costs. It's unfair, and I don't believe that we're treating the public with the respect that they deserve. As far as greenhouse gases in their entirety, yes, there are things we can do and should do to keep our water clean. There are things that we should do to make sure that we're doing everything we can within government, but not setting upon the taxpayers. I don't think that's where we need to go. I'm not happy with these greenhouse bills. I think they're wrong. I think the EV mandate and other things that we are shoving down the throats of our citizenry is absolutely absurd and wrong. And just because we sit here and can do it doesn't mean we should. Thank you.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam President. I respectfully disagree with my colleagues. I think the public does understand this. I think the majority of the public understands this, and they are very worried. They see the effects of climate change and what's going on around them every single day, and they make that very, very clear. We have a whole new area now of psychiatry called climate psychiatry, because eco-anxiety is real. People understand what's going on. They're seeing the increase in diseases. They're seeing it's leading to increase in violence. It's leading to increase in flooding, in heat-related illnesses. And we have the world's experts, thousands of them, that have come together on the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change over years' time, that have come together as a world voice, the utmost scientific world voice, to say, this is what we believe is causing this problem, and here is how we think that we can stop this, and we need to work within this 1.5 degrees Celsius to bring greenhouse gas and bring our greenhouse gas emissions down. They've given us a roadmap and asked us all to do our part. What if everyone in Montana said the same thing? What if everyone in Maryland said, well, why should we do anything? If Pennsylvania's not doing so, if everyone else in the world, I'm not going to do anything until everyone else in the world does their part. What kind of thought process is that? Nothing would get done. It reminds me of one of those big Viking ships where you've got everybody underneath that's supposed to be rowing. But if they're like, well, I'm just one guy, I can stop, I don't have to row. Everybody has to row. Everybody has a stake in this. You breathe every day. You've got children and grandchildren. This is a crisis that is all upon us now, that we have been given the direction and the challenge and the charge to effect. I think it's irresponsible for us not to do that. And I believe that it's shown at the voting booth every 2 years when people are elected, that they're choosing candidates that understand climate change, particularly the young folks, the ones that are the most, not just the young, but they're very concerned about this. The new voters, the new people that are coming in, the new residents, the people that we care for. We all have to do our part. And this is a way that we can do that. And we are already on our way to doing our part. This is goal setting, and it sets aside a process for the agencies to follow. And finally, this is a bill that has broad support, not just from the environmental groups, but from the business groups as well. Our Chamber of Commerce is on board with this now. So when we talk about no one understanding this or being on board, it's just simply not true. There is certainly there are certainly folks that aren't, but I think the majority are. And actually, that's what this vote is about today.
Senator Sokola, you were going to rise, I think you said.
I just rise in support of Senator Hansen's efforts on that. She said it better than I can say it. I'm a little perplexed. It was just a few weeks ago. It was smoggy when we left this building. People were going back to the masks we used during the pandemic, and your eyes were itching, and that was one of the things that we were told for the last 40 years. If we ignored climate change, there would be more forest fires, there'd be more and more intense storms, there'd be more of all these bad effects, there'd be more asthma in our children. It is irresponsible. We are the lowest lying state in the country. Earlier, she floor managed a bill about non-tidal wetlands. Well, guess what? They're going to be tidal wetlands one day, not too far in the future, if we keep ignoring this. And there's more melting and more and fewer glaciers. I went to Alaska just a few years ago and talked to people who had been there 20 years earlier, and they were telling me how far back the glaciers had moved in just that short amount of time, miles back. Incredible differences and they had a map on the wall, and it showed where we were, and it showed where the ice line was 20 years earlier, and what the progression was over that time period. It's staring you right in the face. It's real, and I agree. We would be irresponsible if we ignored it. I think that it might be expensive, but guess what's more expensive? Ignoring it. Because those fires aren't cheap, those hurricanes aren't cheap, those tornadoes aren't cheap, the health effects of increase in asthma, that's not cheap. I think it's time.
Senator Buxton, you had risen.
Yes, Madam President, thank you. I respect the passion of that side. I get it. What I don't appreciate is the dismissal of a difference of thought, which is to say there are some experts who disagree with you. They do. They're experts. They disagree. You can dismiss that, but it doesn't make them any less of an expert. And, we can have a difference of opinion. When I say that, it's, again, Delawareans, I think it's not fair. The Delawareans have made significant contributions to contribute to, dealing with climate change and greenhouse emissions and other. And I think it's unfair to state that the only way that we can do this is through mandates. I just disagree. I think that we should be receptive and encouraging, but when you do what I think we're doing with this, which is take the people out of the decision-making process, I think you dismiss them. I don't think that's fair. I'll end with this, and this does matter. Al Gore said it best when he said, you got the clock's ticking, and if you don't do it, we're not going to be here. And that was what? The deadline was 10 years ago. That doesn't mean he wasn't right. Climate change is real. But what it says is there's only so much that we can do to impact it. And sending alarms or chastising people who disagree with you, I don't think it's fair. Get it, you can do it. You don't have to like it. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Lawson.
Thank you. I got it. I think what this amounts to is, okay, everybody's concerned about it. Yeah, but we built the fire, and now we're going to rush in and try and put it out. We caused the problem by saying, oh, this is this and this is this, and we fanned it up to the point that now it's a bonfire, and now we're going to come in with all these great solutions and put water on it, and we're going to fix it. We caused the problems. We've educated our kids to the point to be scared of everything. Everything. And oh my goodness, we get a little smoke in here, and oh, we have to shut down this and shut down that. And it's just a bit too far for me. Are there changes? Have there been changes since the inception of the world? Absolutely. And it will continue to change. We've had ice ages. We've had 30-some predictions of the end of the calamity that's about to hit us. You all right?
Yeah. No, I was just monitoring something. We're good.
But none of those have come true. Not a one of them. When do we stop chasing this? We've gone too far. We've made jobs. We've made all kinds of things. I mean, we brought Bloom Energy in here, and that was a blooming fiasco. And we've chased these things to the point that it reminds me of a fireman, a junior fireman I knew. He started a fire, and he ran in and called the alarm, and then was the first on the truck to go put it out. That's where we are, folks. And this, I think, is something that we have caused, and now all of a sudden we're going to find the fix for it on the backs of those around us. I appreciate what Senator Townsend said about the blood alcohol being just a point, but at the same time, you're only talking on the average of a 200-pound person, not a globe. Thank you.
Senator Townsend.
Thank you, Madam President. My point would simply be that the same scientific principles hold. The fraction of a percent, whether it's global or in the body, can be real effects from it, real toxicity from it, and that's what's happening to our planet right now. I'll also note that we literally earlier today had young people here seated here who had written very persuasively about environmental issues who in no way, shape, or form are part of starting any fire. The young generation has nothing to do with that, and they are pleading with us to understand what is going on. They are pleading with adults who are maybe more formally educated than they are to do what they are able to do, which is to understand that one person making a contradictory scientific point does not create some big scientific debate. And there's absolutely no doubt that there are very, very tough decisions about how to respond. And I often think back to when I had the chance to study as a graduate student over in China and talk to my Chinese friends who said to me, and this is actually a different spin on what Senator Lawson is saying, that we as a country in China were not the ones who put so much greenhouse gas into the atmosphere throughout much of the 19th and 20th centuries, yet they want a chance to develop. But the reality is that they and we and everyone else are in the same boat. And the idea that we're talking about someone started a fire and is now trying to put it out, there's an irony to that, again, because perhaps right now most of the people in office are ones who are maybe around for part of that fire being started. We heard today from individuals, or at least saw today and honored today, individuals who had nothing to do with it, whose futures have everything to do with whether we get this right. And again, some of the points that are being brought up have some merit in terms of trying to figure out a solution, but at the heart of it is such an unwillingness perhaps or an inability to grasp the enormity of what we are talking about. We cannot get this wrong, and as a state who has some of the most to lose from this, we should lead in getting it right, and that's what this represents.
Senator Brown?
Thank you, Madam President. I rise and support the legislation because we can look as recent as last evening, not only in the city of Newark, but in the city of Wilmington with outages because of last night's weather. I think many of us can remember Hurricane Ida just a few years ago, where a large portion of my Senate district, the 11th Street Bridge neighborhood, was literally wiped out and flooded. And in response to that, we did not just call on DNREC, but we had to call on DHSS and many other state agencies to respond to address that issue. And so I'll stand in support of this legislation because we need to have a plan, because when we're called on by our citizens up and down the state to act, we need to have a plan to put into action.
Senator Hansen. Senator Walsh.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this legislation as well. Another thing we didn't talk about is our something you'll see in the bond committee that we funded was our saltwater intrusion in our back bays and the dredging that we have to do to keep those communities livable, right? It's real. It's global warming, right? So, that's another thing. We have to keep saltwater intrusion. There's areas in the back bay areas that we funded. If we continue to move in that direction, we won't need to fund it anymore. So I rise in support of this legislation.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Madam President. Roll call.
Minister Secretary, kindly call roll on House Bill number 99 as amended.
Senator Brown. Yes. Senator Buxton. No. Senator Gay. Yes. Senator Hansen.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Hawker. No. Senator Hoffner. Yes. Senator Huxtable. Yes. Senator Lawson. No. Senator Lockman. Yes. Senator Mansavinos. Absent. Senator McBride. Yes. Senator Pardee. Yes. Senator Pettyjohn. No. Senator Pinckney. Yes. Senator Poore. Yes. Senator Richardson. Absent. Senator Sokola. Yes. Senator Sturgeon.
Yes.
Yes. Senator Townsend. Yes. Senator Walsh. Yes. Senator Wilson. No. Madam President, the roll call on House Bill number 99 as amended by House Amendment number 1, 14 yes, 5 no, and 2 absent.
Having received the required and sufficient number of votes, House Bill 99 declare passed the Senate. Senator Townsend.
Thank you, Madam President.